Today on the Skid Factory, it's time to put some shiny stuff on the Z32. Welcome back to the Skid Factory. If you saw last week's episode, you'll know that we've made some good progress on my RB30 powered Z32, and we're set to do some more this week. We've had a bunch of nice shiny parts turn up that we've been waiting for a little while, so we can get stuck into fitting those. The inlet manifold from Plazmaman has arrived, and that's sort of it's going to be a big part of this side of the engine bay, so we're pretty keen to get that on there. But before we do that, we're going to have to do the hard yards and get a full exhaust system built. This is a very time-consuming project, as it is with pretty much every car, unless you can buy one off the shelf, so it does take a lot of thought and effort. I've made the dump pipes already, and that was just because they needed to be in place to work out a lot of other stuff that was going on in the engine bay for intakes and hot pipes out of the turbo. So they're sort of sitting there mostly where they're supposed to be, but now we've got to move on to underneath the car and start forming the rest of the exhaust system. I have a whole bunch of mufflers and Raceworks clamps, V-band clamps, and catalytic converters and all sorts of stuff. Some of it we've had here from previous projects that didn't fit, so we've just kept them, and some of them I've ordered new from Golby's. So we'll sort our way through those bits and pieces and use them where necessary. I've got a vague plan of how I'm going to do it, as far as it's going to be mostly a twin 3-inch exhaust system to the back of the car, with some very specific caveats on that. One thing is you never run twin 3-inch exhaust to the back of the car off a twin turbo 6. If you want it to sound any good, it will sound like two charades having a argument up the freeway. So, or even maybe a V6, which is, no one wants that. So I plan on putting them through some sort of like an X pipe or something like that on the way through, and that'll sort of bring it back to the traditional inline 6 sound, which is great, except for the barra. So we don't want to miss out on that RB idle and high RPM sound, because that's one of the best things about them. So we'll get stuck into it and we'll work it out as we go. As always, you never know what's going to happen once you actually start tacking pipes together. Let's throw her in the air and get stuck into it. Things didn't really go exactly to plan with the front pipes. I was going to put a flex joint in there in between the two, which mainly helps with not only expansion but just being able to bolt the things on when you've got that sort of Y-piece arrangement. And these two ends can end up apart from each other and not lining up if you're not careful. But the flex joint, because it's so much bigger, it would have ended up getting torn off on the ground, so I opted out of it and just had to do it carefully. So it's all this front section's done, other than a bracket to hold it to the gearbox, so I'll bolt that back on now and move along with the rest of it. Now that I got the front half of the exhaust done, sort of up to behind the gearbox there, I'm having a little bit of a look at the wastegate outlet pipes. You can see it's pretty crowded down here. I got a pair of GFB EX38 wastegates, one on each turbo. As we saw earlier, I have moved the position of this one just to suit the dump pipe exit. But they're all good now. So what I'm going to do is just so 38 mil, so the 1.5 wastegates. 2 of them, 1 on each turbo. That's more than enough. They should work perfectly fine. I'll get underneath and sort of work out a path for them to go out down through there, and eventually they might get plumbed back in at some point, but I can't guarantee that. Had to put the GoPro on charge, so I didn't film fiddling around with these mufflers. I actually got these mufflers from Golby's to fit to the crown back in the day, but they ended up being a bit too large to fit in the space, so I just hung on to them. They're just like stainless steel Lukey mufflers. If you're old like me, Lukey was the name back in the day for performance mufflers, so they're still around, which is cool. Pretty good quality thing actually. They weld really nicely. I've added these tips. I tried to get a Japanese exhaust system for this car because I wanted that old school sort of 90s Jap look with the, you know, Super Dragon mufflers and that sort of thing, or Apexi Dunks. But the only one I could find was a Fujitsubo, which wasn't really what I wanted. So that's the only people that still make them for these old cars. So I ended up going, I'll just make my own. So I bought these tips off eBay because they were as close as I could get to the old style sort of tip that they used to have on the 90s exhaust systems. So I've welded them on, and for the bracketry, it's got hangers in the back, so it's got a set of dual hangers that sort of hang at 2 different angles. So instead of putting rods through it, which ends up being pretty messy and pulls on the skin, I've just put a little plate on each one, and it's going to bolt through. So I've put some spaces in the mount, and I'll just bolt them on. So once I get them up in there, then I can concentrate on joining the rear section. So it's branched off into 2 pipes again, and finish up welding everything. It's probably going to take quite a while. This is a very complicated sort of job as far as exhaust systems go, going from 2 turbos into a single pipe back out into 2 mufflers. Tends to take time, and time is money, as we know.
That gap, brother.
Yeah.
Smells like chicken. Are you going to utilise these mounts here?
Probably doesn't really need them.
What did this have on it from factory?
I don't know, would have had some big giant barrel things that weighed a ton. That's probably why it's got so many mounts.
Looks good. You just got a right Fujitsubo on there.
Fujitsubo. Well, that's the finished product, all bolted up. We start with a pair of dump pipes, a couple of V-bands so we can get this section off easily for things like gearbox removal. A pair of cats. What I've done is I've used what was an off-the-shelf X-Pipe that I've had sitting on the shelf for years that I didn't really want to use for anything, and I've made it into a twin 3-inch single 3.5-inch merge, and then gone into a 3.5-inch muffler that we had for another project that fits in there nicely. The reason I've done this is, as I said earlier, having twin threes is not good just for the sound. It doesn't sound great most of the time. So I wanted to do some sort of X pipe or balance pipe of some description. But also I don't want this car to be like really loud because my wife is probably going to drive it and she probably won't like that. So I've gone with a big muffler in the middle. There's nowhere else to put mufflers in this thing other than there and at the back, which there's also a couple of 3-inch mufflers, but they're all straight through mufflers, so they're not going to do a lot as far as sound suppression. They're more focused on exhaust flow. So one of the techniques that you use when you're making an exhaust is don't use the same muffler everywhere, because if you do, they'll only do the same thing. They have a specific sort of resonance that they remove, like a range. So if you put those two and this as the same one, you're wasting your time. So choose a different shaped muffler. And doing things like going through mergers and changing the size of the exhaust will also change the exhaust note. That 3.5 inch pipe is actually smaller in overall diameter than the twin 3. But the twin 3 is massive overkill anyway, so it's not going to cause any issues with power or anything like that. The twin 3s at the back is basically just because that's what the Z had in the first place, and I just wanted it to look traditional, as it would if it was a 90s Grand Touring car, so to speak. So yeah, it comes through into here. We've got all the factory hangers being used, and I've got these exhaust tips, which were the closest I could get to what I wanted it to look like, which was like a traditional sort of HKS muffler or whatever from back in the day, which sadly are no longer available. So this will work really well, and I think it's going to sound pretty good as well with that big muffler and these other pair of 3-inch mufflers on there. So looking forward to firing it up actually.
Sweet. What now? Time to bolt that Plazzy on, eh?
Yes, before it fires up, we've got about 4,000 things to do, so we better get moving on that. The inlet manifold has arrived, and that's obviously a critical part to positioning everything for the wiring, which is also one of the big jobs that's got to be done. So let's pull that thing out and bolt her on and see what we're up against. All the freight services seem to be on their best game at this time of year, being Christmas, so I'm grateful for that because I got all my Christmas presents. Got the Plazmaman inlet manifold, got some air filters for the intake, a bunch of stuff from Raceworks. We've got 1500cc injectors to go onto that inlet manifold. I've got a couple of turbo beanies to stop the engine bay catching on fire, which is what people think turbos do to things. They don't. Got all these fittings that I can't remember what they're for, but we'll probably work that out along the way somewhere when something's missing. And I think that's breather hoses for the catch can from the manifold, which is to go into this, which is a very large oversized version of the traditional dry sump type catch can. I like these. They're easy to fit because they're round and they do the job. So now we can get stuck into fitting some stuff up. Plazzy always does a nice product, as you know, and the worst thing about them is you always end up scratching them trying to fit them, which is no exception on this one. We do have a little bit of a problem with it because we didn't have it. We didn't know how big it was or what space it was going to take up, so we're going to have to re-engineer again our clutch system, because even simple measurements tell me that it's going to be about here. So clutch has got to go again, and I'm going to have to probably fit the clutch cylinder inside the car, which I have done before, not on one of these, but on other cars. So luckily we've got that other master cylinder and pedal assembly that a guy sent us. I can't remember his name. What was his name? Corey. Thanks, Corey. So it's actually got that big section where the booster is inside the car, so we can actually just throw that away and use that to mount the clutch cylinder, and then it will just protrude out of here a bit and go down to the slave. So you know, it's all just work. If you don't have something, you just If it's not there, you can't avoid it.
I
That's
thought the RB conversion was meant to be simple.
so did I.
If we had a VR6 in here, it would be finished by now.
You know the 25 mil extra of RB30 is actually definitely causing issues. So keep that in mind if you're ever RB30 25ing or 6ing or whatever on your Skyline. It does make a big difference to the height of everything and bonnet heights and that sort of thing. So keep it in mind.
K24 would have fit better too.
K24 would not have fitted better, and neither would a VR6. But they also wouldn't be an RB. So there's a few accessories you've got to bolt onto these manifolds before you put them on there. This is actually a water manifold, so it looks like a fuel rail, but it's actually for coolant. So you've got coolant coming out of the head in a whole bunch of spots, or 4 different spots. The bit where the water neck is actually only one small bit. So underneath an RB25 factory manifold, it's got a manifold for water as well that then joins into the outlet. So they've sort of done the same sort of thing. Sometimes this goes and joins into here, but this manifold's been sort of specifically made for this car to my specification, even though I didn't really know what it was going to look like, but we'll work that out. On the top here, there's actually bleed ports to bleed air out. So that's a known problem in RB26s back in the day. So they've added these so you can just bleed a bit of air and coolant out into a header tank. We're actually running a header tank, so I'm still sort of trying to decide how I'm going to go about it, but we'll see. Throttle body, we've got a Bosch 74mm drive-by-wire. If you've watched this show, you'll know that we're big fans of drive-by-wire. It's far better and more useful than a cable throttle. I'll never use a cable throttle if I can get away with it. And it's also got an adapter for the Plazmaman clamp, Wiggins clamp setup, so it's all pretty neat. Injectors, there's the Raceworks 1500s. They've got an extender on them. I'm pretty sure you can actually cut down these to get your height. You can see the little rings on them, but I think I'll just leave it because it gives you a bit more room for your ins and outs of your fuel fittings if it's at full height like that. These 1500s are actually new. They've just got them in. They've got the US car injector on them, which is what like LS3s or anything past 2005 or whatever, and they've actually done that purposely as a direct replacement for like LS3, L98s, all that sort of common later model GM stuff. So you can just shove them straight in there and plug them in and not have to put in adapters on them. I just got the plugs to go with them, so we'll be right to wire those up. Now we just got to fit her up.
And scratch it.
And scratch it. I've already done that, so we can just fit it now. The engine bay is really filling up now that the inlet manifold's on there, so I'm taking the tact of just adding pipes, joining things together, putting things in that I know have to be in their place, and I know where they can go. That way we're not sort of using up space that is for something else. So the cold side pipes all tacked up, ready to weld, except for the blower valve that we're going to put on it. So we've got a GFB SV52, so big dog blower valve, bypass valve, whatever you want to call it. It's big, but it's not like physically big, so it should go in there all right. I don't really like putting these outside of the engine bay because they are susceptible to weather, as in getting stuck from having water in them. So prefer to put it in the bay here somewhere, maybe down here, to make it pretty stealth. So it's also close by to the port on the inlet manifold that it's got to connect to as well, so you don't have hoses running everywhere. Probably that is, I think, one of the biggest blow-off valves or bypass valves on the market, but it's also one of the most compact. So these used to be this big, so it's pretty handy. Partially because when we put this pipe in, we've got to actually pass it through in the inner guard here, so having a big giant lump hanging off it can make that fresh pipe that you've just made fit not fit anymore, so this is always a good thing. We'll find a spot for that and mark it up, drill some holes and weld it on.
Missed the shot.
You're too quick, I didn't get the shot.
You're too slow. Finished up that intercooler pipe. You can see the blow-off valve mount there, and also a air temperature sensor bung. That's the valve. So you can see it's got a bolt in the middle of it there. That's actually retaining the thing so it doesn't fall apart. It's just the way they do it. So once you've got it bolted on with these other 4 bolts, you just move that one back into its correct hole, and then you can put there's a couple of different length bolts in the actual box with some instructions about, it basically sets your pressure for the release pressure for the valve. So once that was done, I moved on to mounting the oil cooler, which I've been it's been annoying the hell out of me because I've got a couple of oil coolers and I just couldn't really find a perfect fit for anything, so I've just defaulted back to putting this in the side pod there. You got an intercooler pipe going here, so that's kind of where it's got to sit. It's not, I would have preferred a much larger cooler than that, but unfortunately the space was all taken up, so that's what we're going to have to live with for the moment. And as always, it's always wait and see. Once the thing's running and working and everything, then we'll find out what needs to be done and what doesn't. So that fits okay. I just sort of pulled this headlight out and welded like a piece of flat bar in there that sort of ties in with the guard mount there. It's got a bunch of nutserts and stuff in it, so that's all good. I'll probably sort of try and block off bits to duct it, or we may do it out of fiberglass when Shane works on the bar, but that's probably something for Ron. I sort of fell down a rabbit hole of finishing off stuff that I hadn't done yet, as far as all these block off plates and stuff to block the air that are everywhere. Pulled everything out, and then it sort of went on from there. Ended up with the radiator out, welded some stuff onto the radiators that needed to be done, so the bottom hose is on there. Then I moved on to trying to work out how to do this, the filler and sort of purge tank, or there's a lot of different names for them, but I ended up going with a bit of 4-inch. I've got these little pieces of plate that I've pressed in the press to make them into a it sort of stiffens it all up and makes it look nicer as well. Bottom one's tacked on, that one's on. Now I've got to work on feeding this into it. So it's kind of like a swirl setup. And there's also 3 ports here on the manifold that we talked about that can also be plumbed into that to get steam out of the head outlets. So we'll look at that as well. But for the moment, I'm just going to work on mounting this up between the engine and the radiator and go on from there. Header tank's complete. Well, we thought it was, and then we remembered we've got to put a couple of -6s in just for the turbo water outlets, but I'll do that shortly. So it came up pretty good. It's got ports for a couple of different things. The bleeder ports for the manifolds here that we've got to make a sort of a manifoldy sort of shape, like join them in 3 into 1. And I've got a couple of options to put a coolant pressure sensor in it down the bottom as well. We've got a water temp outlet already in this little neck here. So it goes in here like this.
Is that heater return there too? Is that what that is?
No, that's the manifold underneath. So there's another set of ports coming out underneath, and it goes in. That's the, basically it's just one of the top radiator hoses, so to speak. So that goes like that. I'm going to trim the alternator adjuster bracket a little bit just to give it a bit of space, but that's just a bit of a cut on the grinder, no problem there. Give it a paint. I'm probably going to take all this stuff off and get it powder coated, but at this time of year you can't get anyone to do anything because everyone's on holidays, which is fair enough. So that will have to wait until everyone gets back to work. But we made pretty good progress. The engine bay's starting to look pretty nice now with everything in there, and also very busy of course as well. So that's how it is. We'll probably move on to looking at doing the wiring in the next episode, and maybe have a look at that clutch debacle, as it were, and figure that out as well. And a couple of steps closer to getting the thing running, I suppose, which is always the goal. That'll wrap it up for today's episode. Happy New Year, everybody. Hit the merch store and grab yourself some t-shirts or whatever, maybe a hoodie if you're on the other side of the world, and support the show. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.
How's the Shin Smasher 3000? Dudes!
What's up with the extra bracing on this muffler? What's that there for? Is that...
That's a skid plate for when it gets driven over an inappropriately sized urban speed bump in a shopping centre.
When you jump in a gutter.
Or that, or hitting straight line and roundabouts or whatever. That's stuff that's all probably going to happen to it.
Are you talking about you drive?
No, I'm not talking about me driving it. I'll leave it at that, I think.